My son, who's the father of the children, and his girlfriend have serious addiction problems. They were neglecting their children. The children were the family was essentially homeless, jobless, had no car. They were bouncing around from friend's house to friend's house with these children. They were parenting 5 children at the time.
I was at the forensic interview for the oldest grandchild, and then they came out and they asked me, would you take him? I said, well, of course I would. I wouldn't give him up for anyone, I would. I love my grandchildren. Doesn't matter.
It happened so quickly. They called me up, did a background check. Within 30 minutes, I was cleared. I passed, and then I have a boyfriend that I live with. He passed the background check. It took him less than 30 minutes to get that one passed. And then they called us and say, do you have a place for this child to sleep? Clark and I just stared at each other and looked and saying, now, what are we going to do now?
We would have to go to churches with homeless people to go and feed them. My husband stayed home. He didn't, he wasn't able to go anywhere. But it's a big strain when you just don't have the finances at all. I knew where to go get food, but the thing was that it was clear across town, and I would walk with the children or I would take the bus. If I had money, I would take the bus with the kids. So I was always making sure that, hey, how can I get these resources? But when you first get the kids, it's like, what do you do?
I was on an inner tube in the backyard, retired. I'm actually retired. And I had to return back to the world of work.
They didn't have a home, so they didn't have clothes, they didn't have toys, they didn't have beds, they didn't have car seats, they didn't have strollers, they had nothing. We immediately realized that they needed to have these essential things that children should have. We didn't understand anything about resources and where to get these things.
I was 47 at the time, working 2 jobs and going to college at night. So I took 2 babies to daycare every morning, came back home, took my girls to 2 different schools, went to work, left work, then I had a side business, so I went and met clients, came home, changed clothes, got everybody fast food, and ran out the door to school, and my girls watched their niece and nephew.
Financially, I'm a single parent right now. I get $449 a month for 6 children. They go by my income. I get $431 in food stamps for those children to raise 6 children, and that's all that I get. And that's not including buying clothes, buying shoes. One need braces, $3,000. That's out of my pocket.
We had downsized from our first initial 6 children, and we had downsized, and then when we got the grandkids, we no longer had the room for them. We had a house that was pretty much paid off, and we were ready. We were on the road in the next couple of years to be done and retired, and just, if we had to have odds and ends jobs, because nowadays you pretty much have to with supplemental, but we had to go and we had to buy a bigger home. We had to take out a 15-year mortgage. We have to buy service dogs and special needs beds and special wheelchairs. We've bought 3 vehicles to hold a wheelchair that we never planned on buying. And wheelchair vehicles are not cheap.
We don't get child support, we don't get any of that. And to try and take care of these kids is a full-time job in itself.
What I need is for more help with the food stamps, to feed the kids, to provide cash for them, to enable me to pay for braces for one of them because she needs them, things like that.
I think we ought to commend those people that do step up to the plate and recognize them for what they do.
Right.
But I really think the legislation should focus on where the money should go. And the workers are the DES workers are overworked.
there's something should be done for grandparents to keep those grandchildren together like that they don't have to be in the foster system. Seems like they could do more for the grandparents that's taking care of all these children than giving it and putting them in foster care homes and all over the place and putting all the money there and nothing for the grandparents, who is giving all those children stability to make them do better in life, to keep them together. We need the support.
Help us do basically what we're doing. We're there to take these kids on because they're our blood. We love them. I'm not the person I was 30 years ago. You know, when I raised my kids was totally different. To try to work, when I worked 2 jobs and raised grandkids and still had 2 kids at home, I was amazed at how I could do it. But it gets harder and harder and harder, and a lot of the grandparents I see are even older. And it's like, we need resources, we need help.
I think there needs to be some automatic financial assistance to grandparents raising their grandchildren, and it needs to be provided quickly because the children typically are given to the grandparents without any forewarning or advance notice or advance planning. Therefore, that financial help needs to be made available very quickly. It needs to be much more than it is, and it needs to be sort of automatic so that there aren't a bunch of questions and interviews to go through prior to receiving any assistance. It needs to be a given that grandparents will get some assistance from the state.